great that she's come down all this way to Southampton. And we've got lots of links with Edinburgh as well, so it's one end of the country to the other, so that's really, really good. So Amy, over to you.
Hi everyone. I'm from Edinburgh University. We've done the MOOCs thing for what feels like forever, but it's been just short of a 18-month period now, but live of just under a year. So I know that because we're maybe in a slightly different state and we've kind of got different layers of courses and things going on, that if at any point I'm saying something you'd like more information about, or if you've got a question as we go along, very, very happy to take shout outs and hands up or whatever. This isn't a lecture of any means, this is more of a kind of a discussion, because we still have a lot to learn from everybody else as well, so your questions are really useful for us. So just kind of putting it a little bit in context to start. We had 6 courses go live this year in January. We've just announced a further course on Future. So we started off with Coursera, and we've now just launched a partnership with FutureLearn as well. And we've got a further 6 courses have been announced on Coursera, with about 10 or so in development behind the scenes on top of that. So it's busy, it's exciting, and our subject areas are very broad. We started off with our first 6 courses were 2 courses from each of our colleges at the university. So we had 2 from veterinary medicine, 2 from humanities, and 2 from science. And we're kind of seeing that trend kind of continue. It's very much an even piece across the board. Academics are coming from far and wide to be part of things. Enthusiasm is still very high. One thing that we've always been keen to ensure is that all of our courses are short. These are by no means just taking what we've done online, or taking the on-campus experience, videoing it, putting it online. These are purpose-made for MOOC experiences rather than for taking over what we're already doing. So very similar to how many of the other presenters so far have kind of said, is they've been developing new courses, so it was a real opportunity to be saying, well, what do we want to do in this space, and let's get excited about learning and teaching again, and see what we can do, and challenge things, do things a little bit differently. We were obviously fully online, free to take, but something I'll talk about a little bit later is kind of open resources. If not only were we taking a steer that we should be doing good practicing, where there are resources already out there in the web, and using Creative Commons wherever we possibly can, because it makes it easier for sharing. But actually the most exciting thing is everything we do, wherever we can give license for it, we make Creative Commons. So we're really keen for others to be using the content in different ways, to be repurposing it, recycling it, etc., and just without stifling the innovation as much as we can, say put it out into the world and see what happens. And if we put too many licenses and kind of barriers over that, then it kind of stifle some of the things that can potentially happen. Just at the bottom was just kind of a quick summary of our scheduling, how long it took to go from start to finish on the Coursera initiative, and actually it was very similar for FutureLearn as well. So again, just to kind of give you a little bit of background on some of our subject areas, this was our first 6, so pretty broad. Then we launched the Higgs boson with FutureLearn, and then we launched a further 6 with Coursera. But I can give you more details if anyone has any questions on that. So yeah, why did we do this? It's funny because we hear quite often, especially across the piece, about this being about making money, return on investment, having marketing or whatever. Yes, marketing is important. Yes, it is brand awareness. But actually, this is research and development. This is bread and butter for institutions. It gives us an opportunity to be exploring new spaces, challenging how we're teaching and learning, but also to say, well, this is a research project in itself. It yields data. There's learning analytics that we could be looking at. There's the way that people are using content is going to change, because we're just putting it out there and saying, what happens if? Trailing dots, and then trying to measure the impact in whatever means that could be, and actually realizing that this isn't something that we're very used to. We're not used to kind of saying, here's an unknown entity and engage with it in an unknown way, and then let's try and deal with that on the other side. We're used to saying, here's a defined course, and you sign up to that course, and if you do not complete the course, then you are you're a dropout or you're a failure in some respects. And this is flipping it on its head and saying, you could be coming in with any reason whatsoever. That's really exciting, and we're really keen to have a look at that, and to work with you and trying to ensure that you get the experience out of it that you wish to sign up for, rather than something that we have prescribed onto you. Yes, there's obviously the university strength, but we also saw this as really good fun, and it still is a lot of huge fun, even though it's a bit taxing. It can be exhausting, but it's worth it. It's been incredible, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But we also knew it was never going to make us money. Yes, we can get some return on investment. There are some things that we could be doing, but that's not the point of it. And also, we were never expecting to suddenly break even, because, well, there's a little bit of investment up front that's needed in order to get these things going, and we're keen as well for the schools to be reinvesting any revenue that comes from the courses, say for example on assessments or certificates and things, to be reinvested directly back into the courses themselves, so either developing new content or investment in teaching assistants, etc. So it's not about making back to the centre, it's about developing those courses further in ways that people respond to, and just again saying, what can we do if we invest in these things in different ways and let them grow and nurture them in different ways, I guess. So how did we do it? Well, to begin with, we didn't impose a template. It was asking academics to come to us and say, well, what would you like to do? You've got this blank canvas, how would you like to develop it? And we ended up with 6 very different courses, and it was wonderful actually to see how each academic was viewing it in different ways. Each team brought their own personality, and it's something that we're continuing on throughout our new phases as well. So although on one side it would be a lot easier to say this is the Edinburgh approach to MOOCs and everybody has to do it in the same way and you're only given this amount of time in front of the camera, so on and so forth, and good for scheduling. In many ways that goes against the ethos of us saying, what do you want this space to be, and let's try and work it out. Get us excited about your course and make us want to put something a little bit different into it, and respond to it accordingly with the different kind of resources that we can put in. We were also keen for them to be experimenting. So when we said it's a blank canvas, we said, you've got this framework, and that's great, and you can do that, but you could also break it. If you want to do something different, try it, give it a go. It's funny how having something that's so big and so open and so visible to the world seemed to be a less risky space to experiment in, whereas doing things on campus for credit seemed to have a lot more risks involved. So perhaps it was the nature of it being not credit bearing gave more flexibility for this. In fact, it was short and it wasn't connected to any of our normal activities, that it felt less of a risk to try something out, something new that perhaps people have been thinking about for a while but hadn't necessarily had the space to develop further. And as I said already, we were keen for people to be using content that was sitting in other places, to signpost to other things, to essentially do what we hope to see in the future of people reusing our content. So we reuse other content and see what's sitting around. But most of us are sitting on huge archives in university libraries and digital media and things that people don't see, and unless we have a way of surfacing it, and this is MOOCs are an opportunity for us to do that, to say, look, there's this space, and actually the university is starting to kind of join together and go around to each of the individual departments and say, look, you've got this great resource and we would really like to use it, and they go, oh, that's fantastic, can we put it in? Obviously we have to be concerned about licenses and things, but wherever we can, it seems that people are really keen to be using this as an opportunity to hook their area, their discipline, their department onto the courses that are coming through. So a quick kind of summary on one of our MOOCs, the EDC MOOCs. You may be aware of e-learning digital cultures. They were a little bit different to the standard MOOC space in that it wasn't like the traditional MOOC of having things all sitting within the course site. They said find your own spaces, talk about it wherever you wish to talk about it, and bring it back into an aggregated hashtag feed. And then the academics reflect on what's the conversations that are happening across the community. So more of a connectivist approach, rather than saying, we have prescribed tasks for you, activities that you must engage with at particular times. There was content that was seeded, and then people went off and nurtured it in their own ways and then brought it back to talking to the community. Also, it was quite nice that it ran in parallel with one of our online but for credit MSc programs, the MSc in Digital Education, which had its participants, so its students on that course were also participating in the MOOC as teaching assistants. So it was quite a nice community effort as well, getting more people involved and trying to kind of encourage others to engage in different ways. Another thing that one of our groups played around with, in artificial intelligence planning, AI planning, they took it out to Second Life. So they did a synchronous session on Second Life that was then kind of video captured and then put onto their MOOC space later. Again, another opportunity to kind of get the community to talk. So we had people doing things that were a little bit different, going into other spaces wherever we could, but we also had some very traditional, like introduction to philosophy. Took a very, we have lectures and then parallel activities and questions at the end of each week, and so we had the spectrum wherever we could. Okay, great. Overall, in the first wave, we had 310,000 enrollees on our courses. Now we're in the next stage, and we haven't done as much marketing this time because it's not, as you, we're still waiting to do that next push. But we've now got around 410,000 people enrolled on our courses. So 310 first wave, added on another 100,000 or so who are currently enrolled on our 13 courses in total. The widest range of backgrounds as well, and I can go into more details later if people are interested, but it's much of what everyone else has been saying is that it's almost across the entire piece of countries, wide age ranges, diverse intentions. Everyone came with a different reason for being there. They had different backgrounds, and that in itself was very rich and came out through the forum discussions. But what was most interesting, we've said, going back to the title of this being kind of beyond the hype, MOOCs didn't just bubble up from absolutely nowhere. We've been doing, many people in this room are from institutions that have been doing online education for many, many years, and so it's not actually that new. The stuff that the kind of like the nuggets of learning engagement are similar, if not identical, to what we've been doing before, just in a slightly different virtual learning environment. Obviously, there are differences. It's mainly the scale that's different to what we've done before, but the kind of the broad underlyings are, let me say, what are MOOCs made of? So typical features: there's a virtual learning environment, there's some videos sometimes, interactive tools, discussion forums, etc., etc., etc. So, rushed ahead. But anyway, it wasn't really anything new, but it is something that is enriching to that overall experience. What, however, has been very different is the way that the content is being used. So usually courses sit behind firewalls or shibboleths or whatever, that you can't see what's going on behind it, you can't be reusing it, you can't be sharing it in ways. Whereas MOOCs do provide an opportunity for us to say, well, here's some stuff and it's open to people, and how can we be using it in different ways, and be informing developments within the institution or out with the institution. So here are just a few examples of what we've got going on at the moment with our first 6 courses. On campus, we have some of the learning materials, some of the videos are being used for on-campus activities, but that's just kind of to enrich at the moment. It's by no means a signpost them over and then say come back in 5 weeks' time. It's a embedding the videos in different ways on the virtual learning environment. The data sets themselves, so each of the MOOCs have learning analytics where you can trace the individual learners. That's a huge amount of data that's being kind of created. And those data sets are of real interest to academics across the institution for MSc dissertations, etc., to get their students to be engaging with research of big data sets, data mining that perhaps we haven't necessarily had access to before as readily as well. Every time we launch these courses, we will be creating another data set that could be used within that mix. And also, by them being part of that conversation means that we then have a greater understanding of what's going on, because they're exploring things we wouldn't necessarily be able to explore on our own if we're doing research activities ourselves. We're also seeing that people are starting to signpost their students to other people's MOOCs. So just for, again, the enriching experience, saying, well, there's content sitting over there with Harvard you might be interested in, or there's another course that's coming up that you might want to enroll on that complements this course well. But some of the most interesting stuff is happening off campus. So our content is currently being used in many different ways internationally. So for example, the University of Maryland have taken a copy of critical thinking and a copy of Introduction to Philosophy and are using that for credit-bearing activities. So they've taken a version and they've tweaked it for their own delivery, and then they've assigned credit to that for the university state system. And we've also shared our content with a academic project called Generation Rwanda, and they've taken, again, similar courses, taken copies of them and are delivering them within secondary education within Rwanda to see what works, how does it work, whether students enjoy that experience, whether it's something that they would like to explore. And that's a conversation I need to pick up probably when I get back to the office tomorrow, is where that's going, because they did a pilot and it was very well received, but we're now saying, well, you can use all of our content if you want it, but let's not just kind of say, here's some stuff. We would really like to know what you're doing with it and how we can be developing things that may be, mutually beneficial, of us kind of then also gleaning insight into how our content is being used, because that in itself is a research initiative. On top of that, we have local schools within Edinburgh have been using our content. We've had one example within Introduction to Philosophy, where there was a teacher that enrolled onto the platform and then taught with the class. I think it was an extracurricular activity, but they did the course together. So there was an after-school activity where they sat down with kind of as a group-based discussion, which was lovely, and something else that we really want to be hearing more about. But that's another opportunity for us to pick up in the new year, is how do we best engage with schools? Because it's all well and good saying there's this content there, but not every school is going to have a strong enough internet connection to get everyone to be simultaneously accessing it potentially, or to have enough bits of kit, or to have, we might want to do it by CD, might go old school, and send them out packages in the post, or, there's things that we could be doing, but again, there's no point us going in and saying, here's our content, here you go. Instead, it's a conversation of, we have some content, but how would it be best given to you? Would you prefer it online and it's successful and we can share it, or would you prefer it in a hard copy form? Or it's about discussions and not assuming that you know the best way to be engaging with these new audiences. Instead, saying, let's start building a little bit of a discussion together. The nice thing we're seeing on Coursera is that all of our videos are being translated into other languages, and there are a couple of initiatives that are going on through Coursera to outreach into South America. Is Portuguese and Spanish is being kind of put onto some of the very high, not high recruiting, but high enrollee courses, and critical thinking and philosophy, again, have both been fully translated into Portuguese and Spanish, and are being used for outreach initiatives there, which is great. And finally, all of the courses on Coursera are being streamed on a parallel server for Chinese engagement. So usually there's a number of blocks that are present for people trying to access from a Chinese IP onto some of the data we have on the internet because of local firewalls and such. And so by having parallel servers and streaming systems, it means that people can be engaging with it over that, those usual barriers, which is interesting because China is an area that there's a lot of potential, but we're not necessarily engaging with as well as people think. You know, we have on-campus markets for our MSc programs, for example, that when it's put online, the same demographic is replicated all bar China, and that's really interesting in itself. Of what are the online barriers? And again, it's a conversation, a research project in itself to start asking: are we doing things differently? Is there something that we could learn from this experience? That maybe it's not necessarily that our content is not fit for purpose, but maybe it's sitting in the wrong place, or maybe it's not being serviced, or maybe it is not fit for purpose. Maybe we're pitching it wrong, but we don't know. We just have to ask. But it's also far more than just building the courses. What we're seeing is that academics and the internal community are starting to look at this online movement and go, oh, I want to be part of that. I want to do a MOOC, or I want to be kind of doing some online activities, or maybe I could start reflecting on my on-campus activities to involve more interactions, more online discussions, more synchronous, asynchronous activities. And it's not by any means an overnight change, but it's getting there. The momentum is building, and that's really exciting to see that we are seeing a step change and where people wanting to engage in conversations that we thought the door was shut to. People are now going, actually, I think we're ready now. I think we're ready to start talking about online learning, which is fantastic. And if nothing else, something that we should be building more on. One nice example of this is philosophy again. This was a school that actually had not done any online learning at all, and we threw them right in at the deep end with the MOOCs, in that the head of school was keen, and there was a team identified, and they wanted to do something, but they knew it was scary for them, but they thought, oh, blast, we've only got one shot, let's give it a go. And they loved it so much that they're now doing a fully online MSc program, and they're doing more online activities with their on-campus students, and they're outreaching schools. They've got book and research collaborations that have been established as a result of being in this online space that they've never been in, and actually they've now become, I think, the first fully online philosophy program it might be in the UK, but they're one of the first in something, and that makes them feel good about stuff. But that's no bad thing. The fact that we're saying there is no subject that you can't put online. Give us a challenge and let's do it. Let's think about it in different ways. Is exciting to see. We have a strategy at the university for getting a fully online MSc program in every school, and we're not doing too badly. But there are some schools that haven't crossed that line yet, and we're really keen to know why. And as I alluded to a minute ago, it's predominantly because they just weren't ready at the time that other schools were ready, and some are stepping into the MOOC space as a testing the ground before they go into MSc provision, and some are almost saying, well, others can do the MOOCs thing, and that doesn't look too scary, or they're doing online learning. Okay, maybe I could do that too. And we are seeing step changes of people starting to ask some of those questions, which is great. And what we're also seeing at the moment is a space for collaboration. So with many of our courses, yes, we do have interdisciplinary online courses, but what the MOOCs provide is a platform that it's quite easy actually to do collaborations. Schools can get together and say, let's do something that sits in the middle. We've got many schools who are all collaborating and saying, let's do this one MOOC that makes sense for us. and that isn't something that they've necessarily felt that there was the agility to engage with before. So plans for the future for Edinburgh is that we're looking for more outreach. We're thinking about community provisions, looking to youth groups and schools and such to say how would you like us to engage? Hey, we've got this stuff, is it of use to you? But also we can see that there's a potential connection here. Can we start a conversation? And also getting our students to see that it's something that we acknowledge and we recognise, and we'd quite like if they would like it to be on their transcript, and we can facilitate that. And trying to find a flexible portfolio approach to these things is potentially very, very nice. But working with local needs as well, local and national needs, to say, well, is there a particular MOOC that Scotland needs, is a particular gap that the UK could be filling with a MOOC of some description, and that's not necessarily for just Edinburgh, that's for everyone that's kind of in the MOOC domain, as it were, for us to say, well, we've got this opportunity here, let's collaborate. So moving out of the Edinburgh space and into kind of more of a national sphere, we've seen that obviously MOOCs have had a lot of impact, but how much impact have they actually had? Well, we've seen it's had quite a lot of impact with university provosts and vice chancellors, etc. It's definitely infused them with online learning that perhaps we haven't seen at the same level before. Governments are talking about online learning and wanting to develop new courses, which is pretty exciting. And the media love it. Oh, if you can talk about a course having 200,000 people on it, oh wow, they could not get enough of it. Well, in some respects you can go, oh, but it's not all about that. But in other ways, again, that's high level. BBC Media is a pretty, almost every week there's something about online learning, and that's incredible. That's a domain that we've not been in before.
They're not really interested in you saying, no, that's not the point.
Yeah, exactly. But,
so you just have to sort
but that's all right. If it's getting into mass media and there are people that are looking at these things that perhaps wouldn't have ever thought about it before, wouldn't have thought that there would be an online course for free in branding. Well, why not? And although, in some respects it's had a big impact, it's also probably had more of an impact in the spaces that we're looking in. So the next thing is getting the media out there for outreach to community groups that haven't necessarily had the engagement. We can see there's lots coming through Guardian Education, lots happening in BBC Education, but we don't necessarily see quite as much yet in local newspapers, but maybe we will see more and maybe they'll get excited about it. But what is interesting is the kind of like the loop, the connection on media and the impact that's having on students, and as we've seen that many people are seeing that their students are engaging with the MOOC activities and are keen to do more of it, and are starting to kind of question, well, you're doing this thing over there and that's really fun, why is it not coming over here? They are becoming more vocal and more empowered to kind of speed up and accelerate that rate of change that we see within the on-campus and the online classroom, to say, well, there's things happening that we could be doing, or maybe that we need to start having an internal reflection and kind of development on our learning provisions. But also what's most noticeable is that there's been most impact in the areas that we would expect where the advertising has been happening, of the US, the UK, Australia, etc. And the regions do vary, and I think that's where the future plans are to make sure that we are starting to outreach. And again, your point earlier around internet is a limiting factor here. Not everyone has has broadband access. That's always going to be a difficulty for streaming videos. And so we do need to start thinking, well, this has been a fantastic opportunity. We've seen a lot of impact. But if we're going to really take it to the next level, we do need to start thinking critically of how does it make greatest impact? How do we start out, reaching to those to areas that we hope by teaching the world, we could teach the world, but you can only do that when everybody has access. I think that's pretty much me done. Obviously, just quickly, I'll finish on this. we've got at the moment over 5 million people are talking about online learning, and if that's not an opportunity for us to be capitalising on, that's not something, we've got all these institutions, we're talking about online learning, we've got hundreds and thousands of academics are involved in this stuff. I think the topic of this whole conference is, should we turn back? Well, why would we turn our back on that? Surely we just need to keep running with it and seeing what happens next. But I've got other bits, but I'll stop there. And yes.
Questions. I wonder if we could just take a few questions for Amy now. We do have the panel later on while we're setting up for the online connection.
Oh yeah, sure.
So, Mike.
Yeah. Thanks for that. From your experience so far with Coursera, this sharing of experimentation, is everybody sharing? I mean, it could be seen as quite a competitive advantage to know how to do things well. I mean, is the approach of Coursera to share all this analytics, is approaching all the participants in different universities to share it, or is it seems competitive?
So there's a lot to be said for doing what you wish to see. So everything that we're doing is being shared. It's our content, Creative Commons, but all the research that we're doing, all the scripts that we're developing, they will be Creative Commons open access. All of our materials, all our handbooks, for example, that we give to our academic staff, they're all Creative Commons. They're freely open to anyone. We're hopefully going to be developing a future-learned version of that as well, which we will be circulating to the masses. Our reports are open access. Everything we do, we're trying to share, and we are starting to see noticeable changes. Because actually, what's quite nice is if you do something, you share it, you say it's not finished, it's not perfect, tweak it, do whatever. But let's learn from this process. We've seen our surveys have been used now. That's the European standard for the first kind of questionnaires that are given within Coursera. Now that's great because it makes it really easy for us to then share and compare data sets. If we know that there's a commonality within the question sets that are being asked at the beginning and the demographics that are being taken. We are seeing, especially within Europe, there's a real enthusiasm to be doing this, but not everybody has something to share yet. Many of the partners are still very new. So we're trying to do a bit of put something out there first, and hopefully others will join in. But if they don't, well, then that's fine. Hopefully they found some of the stuff we put out useful, and if they didn't, well, that doesn't matter. At least we tried. So yeah, it would be great to see more people sharing. We'd love to see it happening. People are keen to share, but I don't think that's necessarily Coursera, because Coursera are doing a lot to nurture that development. But it's not necessarily their place, so you must share it. So it kind of has to happen within the institutions.
I've heard talk by Coursera who's saying they've got more data and more knowledge about learning from their platform than the rest of humanity put together. I mean, probably heard that
they are very open-minded to things. If you ask them for information, they do share within the partnership, and then we share the outcomes of that analysis, for example. So we are trying as much as we can to do it. And yeah, they're good guys. Likewise with all the MOOC platforms, everyone has it. They've got their best interests at heart. Let's say. So.
Would you have time for another one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Another question. Anybody else?
Hi, just a detail. I love the way that you're making everything open. There was a clause in Coursera, I wonder if it's changed, to say that all posts and all resources posted by learners are the property of Coursera, or the copyright of Coursera exclusively. Has that changed?
So there's a big difference between the content that's created that's then populated within Coursera and that Coursera instance. So Coursera do not own any of the copyright of materials that are developed by the institution. The institution holds full IPs, but the information that's put into forum discussions and things, because they sit on Coursera's instance on the platform, then Coursera, you could say own, but it's just in that they sit on that data and they hold that data. I don't think it's changed, but they also have no rights over the content that's put on. So they have access to a version of our materials that are uploaded to the Coursera platform for the intention of that particular course, but we can pull it at any time. So it depends what, people don't have to write anything on the forums if they don't want to. I guess it's an interesting one. I don't think that I haven't heard any grumblings of it, and it's something that lots of people are engaging with and don't seem to have a problem with at the moment. Maybe we'll see something in the future, but hopefully not. Hopefully everyone's doing this for the right reasons and not necessarily feeling too bad about sharing and asking questions and things on the forums for IP implications or whatever. I'm not sure, but we'll see, I guess. It's an experiment. Any more questions?
I was just going to follow that up briefly.
Right behind you.
I was just going to follow that up by a question. Supposing you took a screenshot of a forum post or a set of forum posts, etc., and you wanted to use that in an academic publication, would you need to actually ask permission?
If you're taking a screenshot, yes, only because you would then be able to trace the individual if you found them on the Coursera
So
platform.
you could anonymise all of the
Yes, yeah, and so you can definitely use the data within the platform itself for research potential. There's no bars there. It just needs to be anonymised. Taking a screenshot, if it's traceable back to that individual learner, is
from Coursera's point of view, they wouldn't be
and not to the best of my knowledge. But that's also because it advances them for them to have us doing research and things. So I think there's a fine line that seems to be working in everyone's best interest at the moment, but we'll see.
Thank you.
We're still waiting for our connection in America, so are there any more questions?
How do you license your materials, the materials you use? Because you said they are being used in other places. So are they openly licensed? They can change them to make them relevant to the context and use them anyhow they want?
So all of our content they're watermarked, but they are open access and they are we use Creative Commons images wherever we can. If we can't find it there, then so everything we do can be shared and can be then repurposed wherever possible. If we've used a particular image that has a license associated to it, that we've bought that particular image for that particular instance, when we share it, we would make it clear that that particular image would need to have a new license bought for it if it was being used in a particular way. So it's not quite as simple as here's a full kind of copy of it, but we have in each of our courses a copyright section that kind of gives traces of each of the individual resources that are used and what their license means and how we can use it, etc. So hopefully it's as clear as it can be for sharing and repurposing later. But we haven't heard any, mainly because the instances that have been taken for further use and development have been for educational private purpose rather than for MOOC sphere use. It's not then taking, Maryland haven't taken a version and then said, oh, this is the Maryland version of the Edinburgh MOOC being used like a MOOC. It's being used as a private course, and there are certain affordances that come with doing education behind closed. Most people use images that if it were open, they probably would be able to just take something from Google on their slides for a private cohort of students, for example. But we do get away with a lot in education because it's being used for those particular reasons rather than it being kind of an open space. Whereas the minute you put it out to the world and say, here's our content, you kind of need to make sure that you've got a trace for everything that is being used.
There's a question.
Hi Amy, Matt from UCL. What's the reaction been from your student body in terms of, do you know any students at Edinburgh doing any of your MOOCs, or indeed have they been incorporated into any programmes on an official level?
So we actually haven't heard any grammar. Everything that we've heard has been positive, but that's also because we haven't done the whole integration into formally integration into our provisions. It's been more of a, oh, there's some nice videos over there, or there's a good course over there. We also have been very, very clear that we have our MOOCs learners that sit on this platform over there, and if you could be a student of us and happen to be a learner of the MOOC, but you are by no means a student with us if you do the MOOC. So we've been keeping them very, very clear in every kind of document or whatever that goes out. It's always kind of students are the ones that go through our formal kind of enrollment processes, and learners are people that sit on different servers by Coursera or FutureLearn or whatever, keeping a bit of an arm's length. So I think because of that, we probably haven't, we've forgone some of the I guess ambiguity that comes with others talking about students collectively, or kind of MOOC students, or students maybe seeing more of that merging agenda, just maybe because we haven't explored it as much yet, but I guess watch this space. So I know some institutions have had more problems with that than others, but we haven't seen it yet.
Anyway, thank you so much, Amy. Can you also thank you for holding the fort for us when we were connecting to Doug in Vanderbilt University. So my pleasure now to introduce you to Doug Fisher. He's actually a professor on machine learning MOOC. He used machine learning MOOC with his students on campus. And he wrote a paper about wrapping the MOOC around that course with Coursera. And he's very kindly agreed to talk about that with us today. So thank you very much, Doug, and I hope to hear from you soon. Here we go.
Great, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So I'm going to be talking to you today about much of my personal experience wrapping a MOOC in my on-campus courses. I'm not sure how I can control the slide deck there. Who would I be interacting with to do that?
I think we get Martin to do that.
I can just forward it, so if you can forward from the title slide to...
Let me do that, you do it again.
Are you seeing the slides up there?
Not yet.
No, I haven't got the
Let
slides.
me see.
He does it his end.
Yeah.
So is Martin happen to be there?
Yeah.
Here, Doug.
We're all here.
Are you just sharing your slides?
His email.
Let me see.
So you looked into emails. I've got them on email. You just sent them over.
Actually,
Just share your screen. Doug, can you share your screen with us and just show us your...
yes, I probably can. Let's.
If you hover over to the left towards the top, it's the green icon.
A green icon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay.
We click his picture. Click his picture.
That one?
Yeah, that's right.
Let's see. You should be seeing something now.
Yep, we can see
Yeah,
him.
yeah, it's lovely. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Martin. So can you see the title slide?
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm going to try and put it in a slideshow. Everything good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I'm going to skip past the big picture here. I'm pretty sure you all know the big picture, and since we are running behind, I'll simply go to the my experience, and then we'll return to the big picture later. You're probably at this point looking at a slide announcing the Stanford online courses. There's a robot in front from the machine learning course.
Doug, could you just maybe, instead of doing slide share, can you just do it from your deck? We can't see you.
Sure.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Okay. Thanks. So this is the announcement of the Stanford online courses back in, this is November 2011. And there were 3 courses being offered online. One was in machine learning, one was in database, and one was in artificial intelligence. And I was teaching 2 of those 3 courses the following semester in fall 2000, or spring 2012 at Vanderbilt. And for various reasons, I think I was prepared to use other professors' content in my courses, given some earlier experience at the National Science Foundation. But I decided if this material, if these lecture materials were available when I did my courses in spring 2012, I would use them. And in fact, the material was available in spring 2012 when I taught my undergraduate database course and my graduate machine learning course. So you all are pretty, I'm sure, familiar with the idea of flipping the class. So here is a week 2 schedule for an example of what I would do. I would have students watch the videos from Jennifer Whiteham. This is in database. She was the Stanford faculty member teaching the MOOC. This is after the MOOC was done, and this was actually the first time I did this. This was before Coursera was founded, and so there were no terms of service to worry about. The videos were just up and online. I had students watch those. I adopted Jennifer Whiteham's textbook and database to make for a smoother experience for the students because they were both reading and her videos. You can see in the middle that I would also quiz students on the material. So they would watch the videos the week before. They would walk into class. It was a Tuesday class. They would take a quiz on the videos and the reading that they were supposed to do. And then we would do some kind of in-class exercise. And for this example, well, here's an example of Jennifer Whiteham's, a screenshot of Jennifer Whiteham's video in a database. This is a good nuts and bolts lecture. I think I will always want to do the inspirational lectures in person, but for nuts and bolts, I'm a big believer in video. So you can see Jennifer Whiteham there in the bottom right. She's interacting with the screen, displaying PowerPoint. Students would watch these kinds of videos, for the most part, of the nuts and bolts variety. And then they would walk into class following a quiz, and they would do some other exercise. And in this case, this other exercise was to watch a video by Hans Rosling on visualizing data. And you should be seeing Hans here. The year is 1948, and he's talking about a visualization of economics and health in 200 countries over 200 years. Just do a sanity check. Are we all there? Yeah. Great. So they would watch a video like this, a very short video in class, and then they would spend the class reverse engineering a database that would be sufficient to support Hans Rosling's visualization here. And it was a much more interactive experience than just listening to me lecture, giving the same kinds of nuts and bolts that Jennifer Whiteham had already done. Now you might imagine if you're a student and you're watching Hans Rosling lecture and then you're engaged with your colleagues and with the professor in small groups working on a problem, engaged in active learning, that things might improve. And things did improve. This was, when I first started doing this, I was worried, quite frankly, what other people would think of my using other professors' lectures. I was worried about what Vanderbilt would think. I was worried about what my students would think, what my colleagues would think. But it's been a great success, and everyone seems to have liked what I did, which is one reason I'm director of the Vanderbilt Institute for Digital Learning right now. But these are class ratings, and you'll notice that I guess the surprise for me was having my students watch other professors' lectures, my instructor rating has increased across virtually all classes. In my field of special interest, artificial intelligence, it's held steady. So these are ratings that are taken at the end of the semester, and they're on 5-point scales, and on a 5-point scale. And I've done this now in 3 classes. I've highlighted in green, the green box, the database progression. At the bottom there of that green box, you can see in my pre-MOOC use of materials, my ratings were 3 is average, 4 is very good, 5 is excellent. They were decent ratings, but they were nothing to write home about. But those ratings have increased. The means have increased as I've adopted MOOC use and as I have adjusted to it. So that now at the top in spring 2013, a semester ago, things are quite good. I think if you look at the bottom observation, just that summary observation in the red box, again, the experience was that the instructor rating was typically going up, or at least holding steady. And as importantly, I think the standard deviations are going down. Now, there are some confounds to all of this. I was really excited about the course. I don't think, quite frankly, that the fact that the students were watching another professor's lectures, even though they were very good, was primarily responsible for this increase. Although I think it was responsible for some of it, because they could go back, they could watch the lectures over and over again. They were very good lectures. But I think in large part this is due to the fact that they're engaged in active learning inside the classroom. The confounds here are probably several. I was a lot more excited to go in and work with a class in smaller groups than I was to lecture from PowerPoint. Quite frankly, lecturing from PowerPoint has become very old. So that's an example of a confound. I was just a lot more enthusiastic about some of these classes than I had been before. But as a good academic, I think if you're going to be using other people's content, you start producing your own. And I started producing my own for my AI courses first, then for my database courses. And I would simply do voice over PowerPoint. What I noticed after producing some of this content and putting it up online, because I have been impressed by the very good nuts and bolts lectures of some of my colleagues. And if you don't know what a nuts and bolts lecture is, it's describing an algorithm or a mathematical proof in some detail. It's not a kind of inspirational lecture or a big picture lecture. It's sort of getting into the trench and working on something technical. And again, I think these are much better online. And I started doing my own nuts and bolts lecture, and I was happy to find that I could do outstanding nuts and bolts lectures too, so long as I was willing to put the time into them. But what happened after I did this is other students started finding my lectures online and started using it. This was quite a revelation. When this first started happening, you can see the student comments here. They were coming to my YouTube channel to look at my AI videos. These were students in a UC Berkeley MOOC on artificial intelligence. So MOOC students coming to my YouTube station to remediate their understanding of some of the content that had been described in that MOOC. So this was, I went back and verified this. But this is sort of an example, updated statistics on my YouTube channel. And at the top left there, you can see, you can get a glimpse of the pattern of performance over the number of views. 37,000 views is small by MOOC numbers. It's a lot more views than I've ever gotten before. And if you look elsewhere, if you look on the far left or see the subscribers, 121. This is the first time I've ever had followers of any kind in my life. So this is kind of a kick as well. But and this is going to be something that I come back to, is you look at a pattern like this, and it impressed upon me the fact that much of our educational data mining work, so far as MOOCs are concerned, is looking at patterns of student behavior within the MOOC. But really, I think where we will go, I hope where we will go, is understanding that a MOOC is, I like the sun and the solar system, and there's a much larger ad hoc community that grows up around a MOOC. And really what we want to be looking at eventually is that community and mining the data from that larger community. So my hypothesis about my YouTube channel performance is that these high points are synced with MOOC use. And to some extent I verified that. Now, something that I've done since this experience of students using my MOOC is edX has just opened the way for what they call closed instances. And I'm now using that 188 MOOC, the material from that 188 MOOC from UC Berkeley, as part of my current artificial intelligence course. And I don't show you a screenshot here, but I can go in and they seed this closed instance with the UC Berkeley lecture material and quiz material, test material. And I can go in, and I have gone in and swapped out some of their material and substituted some of mine. I've augmented the material, the lecture material from Berkeley with some of my own. I've augmented it with lectures from University of British Columbia. So I've gone in and I've customized my course using UC Berkeley content, Vanderbilt content, University of British Columbia content, and probably down the road other content as well. This is something I'll in a second that, something that I think is really exciting to me is that this MOOC activity has made me feel for the first time as a teacher that I'm a member of a community. I mean, as a scholar, I've been a member of a research community for a very long time, but I have never felt like I was a member of a community as a teacher. When I walked into the class, it was my class, and quite frankly, as you get older, the idea that you are now a member of a teaching community is a lot more exciting than the whole lone wolf idea that you walk into your class and it's your class. That's just an old concept for me now, something that I don't enjoy nearly as much as being a part of a larger scholarly like community of teachers. Just to show you that we can do other kinds of content, it's not all video. This is a wiki book that I started that's community driven. The intent here is to use, well, we're running short on time, so I won't explain it, but community driven content in the form of wiki books, open source materials. The AI course uses a text which is freely available online as well that I can adopt and use in my lectures because of the licensing. The next time that I teach a machine learning course online, I really expect that I'm going to be customizing it even to a greater extent than I did before. And these are the two main themes I want to stress right now is one of community, which I've already talked about, but also customization. I overheard the last speaker talking about University of Edinburgh's AI planning course. But if I ever teach a machine learning course again, I think I will customize it by drawing on, if I can, material from different sources. Not just the machine learning course from Stanford on the Coursera platform that I'd used before, but another machine learning MOOC that may be offered from Washington, and some of the learning content that's in the AI planning courses, natural language courses, as well as some of my own content. So I'm now getting pretty comfortable with the idea that I can customize courses. I can draw from different sources given my edX experience. And students aren't freaked out about this. They like it. They like looking at different professors for different content. That's not something I had thought that they might like, but they seem to. So educational data mining, just some questions suggested by this experience. I think we want to look beyond individual MOOCs and mine data from what I call the MOOC solar system. How do MOOC students interact with YouTube, Wikipedia, other sources? There's going to be a challenge there. How do we get that data? Who's going to give us the data? Is Google going to hand us the data for this kind of thing? How do we link users in a Coursera course or an edX course or Udacity course with users in some of these other open source environments? So some real challenges there about how do you get that data, how do you link it up, and of course, how do you mine it? I think, one thing that I've been tempted to do is start creating content intentionally. So not just when I put up material, when I produce material now, I tend to be, I'm busy right now, but when I do, I intend to be pretty strategic about it. And I'm going to put up content that fills gaps in MOOCs. I, as an expert in a MOOC, know where students are going to have a problem with content in a MOOC, and I can fill that content in. I can bridge those points of difficulty in advance with content of my own. And I think we'll see other examples of that. I want to have my graduate students do this. I've had graduate students in my advanced courses produce and upload educational content as a requirement of the graduate course, and I think I will do that more, and I will have them look to MOOCs to figure out exactly what content will be most useful given the current resources on the web. If we go below to benefits of the MOOCs, I think there are some real, so flipping the classroom's an obvious one. I think there's real course design issues. The previous speaker mentioned that online learning and education have been around for a long time, and that's true. But how do you take, as an on-campus instructor, I think this is a new question, and incorporate a MOOC in whole or in part into an existing on-campus course in a way that's ideal, in some optimal way, in a way that maintains the faculty engagement, second bullet there, and which is not a no-brainer at all. I mean, we can imagine faculty members incorporating MOOCs and then sort of becoming very disengaged, unengaged with their courses. These are things we're going to want to better understand. And then within these local learning communities, in addition just to learning the material, how do students interact as a local learning community in their own class with the global learning community that's part of the MOOC, if in fact the MOOC and the on-campus course are synced? I'm going to ask Fiona for a time check. How am I looking?
It's okay, we can spare you a few more minutes. How much longer do you have to go? We want to ask you some questions.
I can go a very long time. So I will hit a couple more points for you, and then I will close.
Brilliant. Okay.
So this is, even in October 2012, you could complete essentially a computer science degree online and for free, given the MOOCs that were up from different places. And I think that you will, with all this plethora of resources, not just MOOCs, but resources on YouTube, Khan Academy, elsewhere. We know students are already customizing curricula, if you will. They're looking at different ways of working their way through a sequence of courses. So they might take the intro course from edX in programming. They might take a second course in data structures from Udacity, and then move on to some Coursera courses from different universities. And so they create their own sequence, and they can certainly do this. But once students start creating their own sequences and start embedding these within larger social networks, we now open the possibility of crowdsourcing, and that some of these trajectories through existing online courses and other remedial material are endorsed or not endorsed by the community and then become consensus favorites. And so, I think crowdsourcing curricula is going to be something that's going to emerge in the near future. Vanderbilt and the University of Maryland have just joined forces to offer not the first MOOC sequence, not the first MOOC, but the first MOOC sequence. So these are back-to-back MOOCs with a kind of loose, intended to have a loose coupling, and so that students will get something added by doing the sequence above and beyond simply taking two independent MOOCs. Again, I think you will see university partnerships that create these curricular constructs that then are vetted by the community. I'm going to go to this is not the very end, but this is my last slide, design strategies for MOOCs. We want to start designing MOOCs with local learning communities in mind. Not just, so much of the MOOC landscape now is opportunistic. We use MOOCs for local learning communities, but how can we design? What are the design criteria when we actually start deliberately designing MOOCs with local learning communities as well as global learning communities in mind? Design MOOCs for remixing. Again, I think customization is going to be a big thing, and if you can create your MOOC so that I can swap in certain things and take out other things, I think it will be a benefit. And finally, design MOOCs with research opportunities in mind. So we can use MOOCs for research questions. Right now, much of the data mining is, again, opportunistic. Let's look at the data and see what happens. But let's say that midway through a class, I ask half the students the following question. If you finish with distinction, would you be willing to become a community TA for the next offering of this class? I ask that question of half the students. I don't ask it of the other half. And I look to see how such a question, as simple as it may seem, affects retention rates, affects completion rates, affects the rates at which students obtain distinction. Another example that we might ask is, we're interested in looking at MOOCs and other kinds of social media. We want to have students tweet some online lectures and then take quizzes. Half the students tweet, half the students don't in real time, and we look to see how this improves or doesn't comprehension in quizzes and whatnot. And so moving from opportunistic research to deliberative planned hypothesis testing is something that I think certainly at Vanderbilt you'll see more of, and but I can't help but to think you'll see it everywhere if it's not happening already. I guess I'll just stop right there, Fiona, because as I said, I could go on a long time.
No, that's lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. It's really weird talking to a screen, so it's really odd that I can't see you. But I'm just going to ask if there are any questions for you. Does anyone have any questions for Doug? Oh yeah, we do. I'll just get the microphone so you can hear Doug.
Hi Doug, this is Helena Gillespie from UEA in Norwich, and I was just wondering if we could transport you back a few years to your beginnings of dabblings with MOOCs. Can you hear me clearly? Clearly not.
Come up.
Fiona, can you repeat that?
Yeah. We're just going to come up to the front and then.
Okay.
Hi Doug, this is Helena Gillespie from UEA, and I just wanted to ask you if we could transport you back in time a few years to the beginnings of your dabblings in the world of MOOCs. Is there anything that you would do differently? Because that's kind of where we're at the moment, and I think we'd kind of like to learn from your experience, and if there are some traps out there, we'd quite like not to fall into them. So is there anything that you would change or do differently, or is the fact, I really like the way you just sort of described it as sort of serendipitous. Is the serendipitous thing just part of what we should embrace? Thanks.
Well, I think to some extent the serendipitous is something we should embrace. We should try certainly new things. I am sort of naturally conservative in doing these kinds of things, and I think that conservatism was an advantage. One thing I was told by the higher level administration here is, you are in your current position as director because you did some interesting things and you did them by the rules. So, for example, if you have MOOCs in your courses, this is something to think about. If you use MOOC materials in your classes, At least it was the case that some of the terms of service for some of these groups, Coursera, for example, said that you needed explicit written permission if you were going to use this material as part of a tuition bearing course. Now the problem is, if an instructor requires that students turn in assignments from a MOOC as part of their on-campus course, the instructor is not in violation of those terms of service. The students are in violation of those terms of service for turning it in. And you don't want to, as an instructor, put your students in violation of terms of service. So those kinds of sort of legalistic traps are things to think about as you move forward. Student, you know, you might start off slowly. I sort of naturally started off slowly. I did not rely on any of the material other than the lectures. I quizzed the students myself, had them do the different assignments than the MOOC assignments. So they were watching lectures, but I was still remaining very engaged in the course. Again, I think a possible trap, and it's to some extent something I have felt this year for the first time, but I think it's probably just due to my new job rather than the way I've structured the course per se, is I think we want to be aware of getting too, faculty becoming disengaged from their students because they are relying heavily, or they start relying too heavily on the MOOC material. There is also, I think, you want to think about how is the online material going to relate to the in-class experience. Creating in-class activity takes time, and if you don't take the time to create that in-class activity, I think you will fall down as an instructor. The students won't like it. So there has to be some relationship between them.
Okay, thank you. So we've got time for one more short question if there's one. No, there's no more questions, Doug. Thank you so much. That was excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Go straight into the next one now, and I think what we'll do is we'll take some time out for the break because we've had quite a long time for break. So we'll just go straight into Coventry now. So go from America to Coventry, that'd be lovely. But we can always cut out a little time from the break. So that's good, isn't it? But the medium was the message there. We like when the medium was the message, don't we? This is one, Helen, this is one. Does anyone want to make any comments while we're waiting? Anything from the day so far? All right, save your questions for the panelists. Mike wants to talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think
what we want to do is.
It's okay.
I mean, example on my John's slides, I think you said the textbooks for the current generation. I mean, this idea of using other people's materials has always been available and possible, but the claim was starting higher education, university people like doing, which is interesting given the fact that there's also in research focused universities the argument that staff haven't got time teaching, they want to focus on research. So, one question is, why should they do it now when they haven't done it in the past? That would be interesting to do. Because in a way it's even harder.
I know. I do think though there's more of a sense of community around this kind of music. Yeah. I do really feel that. I feel that more than everyone says. Oh, this is not new. We've been doing this for years. It's distance learning and stuff. But what we haven't had is everyone as a collective agreeing.
So it's the culture of remixing, isn't it? So there's been a cultural change, and that cultural change is happening, and people are experimenting.
Sorry, Sue from Southampton talking about her next door neighbour office person. It's the culture, we've got a culture of remixing and it's emerging and we're understanding it. And as our understanding becomes refined and as our individual practice becomes more familiar with that, then we're more likely for that to happen. And there are some people for whom it will be too much, but other people for whom it will be a perfectly natural and understandable thing. And the same thing, that as Doug was saying about having the students contribute, students as producers or students as creators. The point is that might be more likely to happen when the students are already doing that. It's something that they've just grown up doing, maybe sitting as a teenager in front of a computer just mixing and remixing. It's just a thing that you do.
I don't think the remixing thing is a new thing at all. I think we found out through 3 years of UK
being sold at a high price. But now I made images, and images are abundant. They can be reproduced at no cost, and and shipped at no cost. And so my business model, it had to change. I mean, I've come to recognise this in retrospect now. But that was a really important moment, understanding that, in fact, the photograph does one thing: it's fixed in time and it's location specific, whereas the image is abundant and it's distributed, and it can connect you to other people. And so in 2008, a friend of mine asked me to write some classes for a new course, a new university photography course. And I said I would do it, but I couldn't write the same classes that I'd learnt as a student, because they'd been written in the 70s or whatever, and it would be entirely disingenuous, to hold up these famous people that I'd photographed that represented a business model that changed completely, and then to try and sell that. So I said, yeah, I'll write the classes, but it has to address these issues. It has to address the fact that it's unclear as to what a 21st century photographer is when everyone has a camera and the means to publish. What is it that makes a professional different? And so that was the basis for writing the classes. Now, I had to learn how to teach pretty quickly, and I had to learn what to teach pretty quickly. And so it made sense to stick the class on a blog, to ask the big, difficult questions publicly, and then seek out answers from whoever had them. I mean, for instance, this idea about rethinking your product, that's what I had to do as a photographer. What was my product when it couldn't be photographs anymore, when I made images now? That was something that the science fiction writer Cory Doctorow helped me to come to an understanding with. When he sort of shared his business model, one of his business models, he was giving away e-books, e-versions of his book, for free, and still selling hard copy books as well. And he was making a healthy living at this, and he shared that idea of versioning out what we do, rethinking what we do, with me. And I trialed it as a photographer, and it was quite successful. So we unpicked things like that in the classes. That was the beginnings of a class called Picturing the Body, known as PicBod now by its Twitter hashtag. And it was something we went on to develop and explore even further in another class called Photography and Narrative, which is known now by its hashtag, which is PhoneArt.
Just to summarise, that you took your experiences as a photographer where the business model was about allowing more openness to what you were doing as a photographer, gave you greater reach and greater impact, and to mirror that in an education setting.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that was it. So, what I did was I realised that the images would connect me to people, using the internet enabled me to use the image to connect to people who I could reach. It was a very discerning way of reaching people who would be most interested in other versions of my product. And so I could use the image to reach out to distributed geeks, let's say, who would then come to me to buy this other version of the product, let's say the print, for instance. So a super fan of Heath Ledger would come to me to buy another version of the product. They'd buy the signed print. So yes, that was something that enabled me to do. Now, when coming to teaching, when I put it on the blog, the first thing that people said was, if you give this away for free, then no one's going to buy it. And I had to sort of then say, but this is similar to my photography, my journey as a photographer, In fact, the product isn't the knowledge. You can give that away for free. The product is the learning experience. And what giving away the knowledge does, if you will, is it connects all those people, and you have suddenly this sort of very networked experience with a huge amount of added value and added opportunities for the people who bought the version which is to sit in the room, the premium version. And
so, just when thinking about what you've got a vision of what you want to achieve. In terms of the teaching design, what was your starting point? Was the university VLE ever in the picture, or was it you wanted to start a clean piece of paper from scratch, and how did you get from that to where you are now?
Well, I realised very quickly that any barrier to entry would stop most people engaging. then there were a number of barriers to entry. One was, so with regard to the university VLE, one was that you had to pay £27,000 to get access to that. So that narrowed down the class quite quickly and substantially to, you know, whatever it is, 40 17-year-olds or 40 18-year-olds in the room. So, you know, so that really wasn't appropriate. And similarly, you know, every time I considered a space or a different way of teaching or speaking, I had to think, is this going to be a barrier to entry? So it's not using academic language a lot of the time so that anyone can engage with it, not using discipline-specific language so that people could engage with it. Using a blog that people didn't have to sign up to engage with. That was important, so that people would sort of drop by and drop in. And of course, there were other reasons as well for using. I was using Blogger at the time. That's the first one I did. It was I had no money. Had no money at all, no resources, and so everything had to be free. But what this meant, and I realised this afterwards, one of the strengths was that I had no money. I couldn't afford to build an entirely new network. I had to go to the networks that were already established, and those networks happened to be really well populated. And so it meant, you know, going to Twitter, going to Flickr, going to Vimeo, going to SoundCloud, all those spaces where the fish are already swimming, as it were. And go in there and say who's interested in this class, who's interested in this subject area, rather than having them to change their existing social media behaviours in order to do something entirely different. I mean, I've come to understand now that's largely unsustainable. You know, don't build a new version of Facebook at university. Use Facebook. It's really good at being Facebook.
So with these spaces, as a photographer, were you already, you know, presence on Flickr, presence on Vimeo? Were any of these new spaces for you?
It was all new spaces. I'd never had a blog. I had to learn from scratch. And so I go back now, and I was quite open about it. I didn't know how to teach, so I needed to learn as quickly as possible. I asked for help. I didn't know how to know what to teach. There were no answers. The book's not been written yet on what it is to be a 21st century visual storyteller. So if you go back to that first, it is one blog post for the entire course. The entire course the entire post gets longer and longer and longer, with the comments just getting longer, and it's acutely embarrassing. But then that's just the nature of learning openly. It is people have been nothing but forgiving to me. Every time I've asked for help, people have come out and helped. No one's ever said, well, that's rubbish what you did there. People have always been very generous and always sort of sought to help. You know, sitting next to Alan Levine, who continues to help me constantly, and I hope I feed back to him. The point was, no, I'd never blogged, I'd never used any of these spaces before, so I came as a learner. I came as a peer learner, and I learned from my students who were using these spaces, and they could tell me how to navigate them. I mean, that wasn't actually a bad thing in itself.
Yeah, it's probably at this point we're pulling in Alan. So around 2008, 2009, was that when the S106 started?
Actually, it was 2010.
2010, right.
So that was Jim Groom's creation at University of Mary Washington. I had an interest in this idea of digital storytelling. I went to a conference first on it in the 90s, when it was really a film-based thing, popularized very well by the Center for Digital Storytelling. A lot about personal narrative and people learning how to craft a story and then present it in digital form. And so I was always interested because I've long had an interest in the platform of the web as means of expression and publishing. And the idea that a story on the web was innately different from a story in sound or in video because of the affordances of the web to link, to cross media. You know, there's people like Henry Jenkins who've been researching the idea of transmedia storytelling. And Jim Groom took this course at the University of Mary Washington. It is on the books as a computer science class as digital storytelling. It had been taught in a classroom by a teacher with lectures and a book and students doing video. And when Jim took it on in January of 2010, he had this idea of putting the students in the web to do their work, but also with the idea of importance of this notion about students learning to be able to create their own digital space. So they would have to register web domains, not use anything the university provided, and learn not only the things about publishing their work, but also what it took to install WordPress, to manage things, to have control over that digital space. And I was interested, among other people, I followed what they were doing because the students were publishing their work in the open. Jim was publishing his, class in the open, and you could be part of it as an observer, and that was very interesting. And then in October of 2010, someone asked him, and this was in the context of the first, MOOC, the CCK08 that George Siemens and Stephen founded, the idea about having a network that participated in the course. So, we were aware and influenced by that, but the idea of DS-106 in January 2010 being something that people not registered in the course could participate in, they would set up their own blogs and have their content feed into the central course. And the parallels, I think, that are very important and why I got very interested in what Jonathan was doing, different sort of approaches to platforms, but similar in the idea that the students who paid for the class and had the classroom experience, you weren't trying to replicate that same experience for the open participants. And at the same time, what the open participants did was not the same as the students were doing, but there was somewhat of an overlap. So you benefit by having people from the outside participate, react, communicate, maybe even collaborate with these students, but they definitely had a different experience. And to me, that's what makes what we're doing not really the thing where you're trying to have everybody go through and get this same carbon copy experience.
Sounds quite interesting. That's kind of a thread between these. It's the literacies that people are developing as they go along. So, Jonathan, you were saying, you were picking this, you were learning as you were going along, and I imagine a lot of your students are learning as they're going along. It's a course after all, they should be learning, but they're learning about the kind of digital presence, being online, publishing stuff online. Is that all kind of integrated into the course in terms of support?
In terms of support, it's actually it's kind of fundamental, and it's grown to be fundamental. We've talked about digital photography for years, but we haven't actually thought about what that means. We've always talked about what it does. It means a digital camera, but to actually discuss what the image means, we've never really done that. And so yes, now the course is much more now about visual literacy and about digital fluency. And so yes, it's about having something to say, being able to say it very clearly. But then in amongst all the digital noise, it's about being heard. And that's the bit about the sort of digital fluency. So is it supported in a sort of academic sense? Yes. It's now part of the fabric of the course. We have to learn how to use these spaces and how to use and navigate through these spaces, these digital spaces. We also sort of think about what it is to be a sort of digital citizen as well.
I suppose you get this question quite often, how much of an administration overhead is it to run the course in the way you have?
Administration overhead. Okay, so we should clarify exactly. Me opening up by saying I don't run a MOOC. So, mine is a regular class which sits within a closed undergraduate course, photography course. It lasts for 10 weeks. But as Alan described, there is a version of the experience that you can have by joining via the blog, submitting your pictures, listening to the lectures. Crucially, one of the crucial things is tweeting your notes. So if people are listening now, and I'm not making sense, if you tweet your questions, we haven't established a hashtag, so I guess you'll maybe even establish a hashtag afterwards. Because I'm listening in now, just as the contributors are to Phonar. After we've recorded a lecture, they listen in very often and they'll actually respond to the notes and the comments that people put as they listen to the lectures. And so I'll do that now. I'll try and answer questions now if people have them. But I have gone and lost my thread.
But if I could jump in, I mean, Jonathan downplays, his not being an academic, but his intuition is so perfect for this about how people engage. And the idea, the UnMOOC idea that it's not this box that's a course, that is an entire experience, that there's this whole cultural and social framework that builds around it, that means human-to-human connection and the way we interact with each other, which you can't package, you can't plan, you can set up. So like in DS-106, we don't prescribe, so much of digital classes and learning ends up, like Jonathan describes, focusing on the tools. And it becomes it becomes so minute and uninteresting, and the end product. And students come in with, I refer to it as like an assignment mindset. They need to produce something that's polished, and that's what they chuck in the box. And what we really want to encourage is the people to sort of share their process and share the thinking behind the media things that they create, and create stuff that's bad. So we have sort of the same philosophy about, we don't come off as teachers of this class as being perfect. So we mess up in public, and students see that and they realize, I don't have to be perfect, and I can try something new that doesn't have to be perfect, and it's okay. And then they get the support of the community around them. So that community building thing, and even this idea, you know, this word, we always talk about building communities. You don't really build communities, they happen. And they don't happen accidentally, they happen in some, you know, nexus of place, whether it's a cafe or a park. But they don't always happen where you build your nice, shiny course MOOC box.
No, and those communities as well have become probably the most valuable aspect of our entire course. Currently there are still only 2 open classes within the degree program. But you know, the most people we've had come to one 10-week iteration is over 35,000. Now that's 35, the compound network opportunities from that many people coming to look at your work and listen to the class with you over 10 weeks is phenomenal. And as you say, Alan, you can build those, you can put the things in place to hope those networks sort of build. But I think that one of the most valuable things that people can now draw from some of the stuff that we've done is to adapt or adopt some of the things that we've done, because they can make less mistakes. I don't want people to go away thinking that what we do, even though I've sort of described it as learning how to teach and learning what to teach, that it lacks rigor or any sort of sustained academic engagement, because it doesn't. You know, I think it is fairly rigorous, and there is we work really, really hard to make sure that the quality is the very best that we can make it. I mean, I think we should rethink what the product is as an education institution, as educators. You know, I can't see a reason for not teaching this way. It's so valuable. It enriches the learning experience so much. It repositions what we do. And actually, you know, it doesn't actually cost that much at all. It just kind of makes sense. I mean, we're talking about open and connected teaching and learning here. I'm not going to use the word MOOC, because mine isn't distance learning on an industrial scale, which is what I see when I see most MOOCs. You know, I think that actually works out to delouse, I think, if we're going to start. What I'm saying is that to actually think that the class isn't already connected is a kind of a mistake, because the class is connected. The students are all on Facebook, they're all on Twitter, they're all on all this, so the class is connected. The only person at this point who isn't connected is the teacher. And so where's the sense in that? If the teacher just connects to this network, then they can augment and enrich the experience, not only of learning, but teaching as well. I've learned how to teach, and I'm learning how to teach from people that are really into this, and they're really good teachers. You know, it's accelerated how I've learned to do what I do. I don't know, 100-fold it must be. And so it seems to me that there kind of isn't an option. There isn't an option for photographers anymore. The old business model is broken. The product is very, very different now. If you want to operate as a visual storyteller in the 21st century, then you have to rethink what your skill sets are and what your values are as a supplier. And so I think it's much the same for educators, that we have to rethink what we are, and we're in a great position to do this. The bricks and mortar experience is very expensive to run, but it's marvellous. It's great. It's what students want to go to college for. There is no reason why we can't have this virtual version as well, enriching that on-site experience. It really is a win-win, virtuous circle, whatever we want to describe it as.
I mean, Jonathan's parallel example of his recognition of how his business model for photography is not adaptable to the way science, technology and culture are going. You know, MOOCs get expensive largely because of this reliance on high production video. I mean, that's where those big costs are. That's why they're getting into these hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's a lot being put into these high production videos. And that's not really changing much of the methodology of the teaching. That's that's one of those, transference of what is done inside the classroom to going on the web.
And if people are sparking up their Twitter tweet decks or whatever they use, if you do a search on the hashtag Phonar, then the reason I'm not with you today is because I had to teach my Phonar class this morning. And Alan kindly flew over from America just to attend our Phonar class in person.
That is the only reason I'm in the UK, Jonathan. You know that.
What's he doing here then?
And so
I'm soaking up the sunshine.
And if you do a search on Phonar right now, then you should see the echoes of today's class. So today we will have listened to a lecture, to an interview that I did this morning with an artist called Sarah Davidman, and with the founder of the Pathshala Institute in Bangladesh, which I did last week. He's gone back to Bangladesh, and so you should see echoes of the tweets, the comments, and the discussion there if you sort of scroll through that. I hope so, anyway. But if you tweet now, or have been tweeting, then hopefully I'm responding to, and Alan is responding to your comments and questions.
That was a bit meta.
Okay, that was different. So we've asked people to tweet some questions, so we do have some questions. But has anyone got any questions right now that they'd like to ask?
We should.
Who's here? Is he not? Yeah.
Can you guys hear us?
Can you hear us, Jonathan? And
Loud and clear.
yeah,
We hear you.
hello.
Can you hear Jonathan? Can Jonathan hear?
He's put thumbs up, but we
Okay.
can't hear you. That's the problem there. So, are there any questions? Stunned silence.
I've got a question actually,
okay.
and that is,
Sorry.
hi Jonathan, Adam Warren from Southampton. My question is, does your model only work for particular disciplines? So for example, how would it work with hotel management or surgery or something? But hotel management is perhaps a more realistic example.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
That's something that we have been thinking about constantly. That's where the really interesting future of this lies. I think is pushing it out beyond digital storytelling into other areas. I mean, surgery, no. I think I'd still go with a dentist or a doctor that had attended bricks and mortar institution, and I knew, that had gone through the regular system. But hotel management, I'll be honest, I haven't thought about it. So asking me to do it on the fly, I'm probably going to do a bad job of it. I have begun to think about how it might apply to a maths course, or an English literature course, or an English language course, or perhaps even a science course. There, I think that's really interesting, where you start to push out into the audience stroke community that are attending the class, and ask questions of them, and sort of as both a learner and as both a teacher and a learner. So the short answer is, I think it's absolutely not only applicable to photography. If we'd have started this out, I think if we'd have started out wanting to write an open and connected class, I don't think we would have started with photography. We might have looked at a storytelling class, but I don't think we'd have started with photography. So yeah, I think there are lots of things that other people can adapt and adopt, and I hope they do. Does that answer that question, or is that just a riff?
No, that's fine. That's fine. We have a question via Twitter, and that was, who owns the content? So is it you, or is it the students?
Yes, I tried to answer that, or I tried to answer one question. So, well, I'm very clear about this. I write the course. Everything that I write is licensed CC BY, so that it's there specifically to be adapted and adopted. But over the course of the class and each iteration, the students feed in, or the lecturers chip in, and it moves beyond anything that I originally authored. And so, who owns it? And I guess we all own it. Is there another question that's buried within that ownership question? One of wanting who if you own it, do you get to sell it or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah. It's Helena Gillespie here. I guess that's my question, and
Hiya.
I guess there is something probably hidden within there. I guess I'm asking you if there've been any problems about that, because my campus-based students, we do various things, and they're blogging at the moment, and one of the things that they're getting concerned about is who's going to read their blog, and what I'm going to do with it, and I think it's partly unfamiliar. These are first years. Unfamiliarity with the medium that's making them nervous, but because there is this kind of hype in the media about young people and digital content and digital identities and somebody out there on the internet is watching you and all of that. I just wondered whether those two things had kind of come up against each other in kind of unhelpful ways, or whether students feel comfortable in sharing and sharing ownership of materials in the same way that you and I might do as educators. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yes. There definitely isn't a silver bullet answer, and I think one has to take each case by case. Some students really are reluctant to share stuff, and you can always make blogs closed, or they can choose to not blog if that's the case. But on this idea of navigating these online social spaces, if we will, what better place to learn about that than at school with a teacher? I want my kids to learn this as a part of their learning experience. If we don't, this was my point about, which I made really badly, about people saying they teach digital photography, but they're not teaching about making photographs of the image in digital spaces. I see it as part of my job, my role, to take them by the hand and take them through these digital spaces, to show what is or isn't appropriate to share, to discuss in a safe, relatively safe environment why perhaps it isn't appropriate to share that in this space, or how to deal with that very, very negative response that you received to that work, or the attack that I got in the press. We had one class where the students became very territorial when someone wrote an article that was critical of me, and I said, you know what, this is you can choose to jump on the comments section and start attacking these people back, or someone gave me some great advice there some time ago, and they said, if you are attacked, there are only two things that you do. One of them is that you completely ignore this person. You do not shine your spotlight on them. Or the other thing is that you befriend them and you are completely nice to them. Now, I passed that lesson on because it was really valuable to me to learn that. I was really struggling to cope with the attacks that I was receiving. And it turned into a really valuable lesson for the students. So we wouldn't have had that had I not been criticised publicly and had the students not been in that social space.
Okay, thank you very much. So, are there any more questions before we close? No. Okay, lovely. Okay, well, thank you very much. That was really innovative. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Bye. Right, I think we'll just have a quick break now. We've got some tea, coffee, and cake out there, just in case you have enough cake at lunch.
Oh, I could always have.
There's always time for cake. Okay. And then we'll just come back in for our session, yeah. Just get the coffee and cake. I'm enjoying it. It feels like you kind of mashed up things. You know, it feels like it. But it feels like it's but I think it's really important that we do this. And you only have to look at the Twitter feed to see the people who are not doing that.
Occasionally.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the tea and cake. There's more cake out there if you need it later on. So Martin, this is your session. Innovation Technology Manager. Show me the data. This is really interesting. This is the bit that we've all been waiting for. What can we do with the data? So thank you, Martin.
No pressure. I'm sure you all want to, I need to get back up to Edinburgh as well. I'm being really safe with this one. Slides. So we'll see how that goes. And did have another joke, but I've forgotten it. Yeah, so I'll just move on. Oh yeah, I remember now. I'm not just the AV guy, for those that don't know me. I do a lot of things, lots of different things. And one of those things is I like dabbling with data and analytics, in particular learning analytics, which I hope all of you have that word buzzing in your ears, and PVCs are asking you questions like, what should we be doing about learning analytics? In the context of MOOCs, this was a slide I got from Simon Buckinghamshire, who's doing a lot to future learning analytics. Just as Google have made their fortune off data and Amazon have made their fortune off data, this is where a lot of people see MOOCs making their money off data. So it's not a surprise when Coursera announced that they're tying in their whole platform with a career service, because they want to use the data that you're generating constantly to come up with something. But before I go a bit more into this, it's probably worth just considering what analytics is. This is a definition that my former colleague Adam Cooper put forward. If you haven't seen it, there's a series of briefing papers published by CETIS on not just learning analytics, the entire spectrum of analytics, and it's a very good set of publications for you to have a look at. And this is the definition that he put forward of actionable insights. So taking something and producing something that we can do as a result of it. But breaking this down into a very simplistic model, you've got some data, you do some analytic, you get some insight. But when you start looking at this one in more detail, insight, who's this insight for? There's various actors within this, and it was quite nice to see Simon Nelson this morning talking about the self, the learner. So the learner getting some insight about where they should take their own direction of study. Also, you have the tutor, who quite often at the tutor level, it might be, how do I make this better? How do I make this design better? Where are the things the points where the students are struggling. The institution, the insight for them might be who are students that we want to convert onto our courses. And so we have this mix of educational commercial drivers as well. To get to an insight, you need an analytic. How? The top section of that list comes from a paper that Rebecca Ferguson and Simon Buckingham wrote on 5 different types of learning analytic for social. So you've got social network analysis, discourse, content, disposition, content. One of the reasons I'm quite interested in the field of learning analytics is because it draws in so many different disciplines. There's so many different ways that you might want to analyze data. And I think it's something to keep reminding ourselves it's not just about learning analytics. In this context, administration, that is another aspect of analysis that's quite important. And then the data, I was thinking about what data there is, and within the current climate of FutureLearn, Coursera, edX, it's very platform as a service model. So there's data being collected by these platforms. But in the wider context, if you start pulling in connectivist style courses, you have service data, so data from Twitter, Facebook, the open web. So these can all be sources that pull in. And there's, I think, something that's quite often overlooked is access and availability of that data. Or perhaps it's not being overlooked now. I'm sure quite a few of you now running courses are scratching your heads about where's the data, where's the useful data, where's the data I can actually use. And there's lots of threads from data to an analytic to an insight. So what I thought I'd do is just show you some existing examples of how analytics has been applied to open courses. This is one that really caught my eye, and I was quite early in my interest in analytics, and I saw this. If it works, hopefully. I said there was no tech. I lied. There's a video. This is Daphne Krula.
So here's an example of that from Andrew's machine learning class again. This is a distribution of wrong answers to one of the programming assignments. The answers happen to be pairs of numbers, which is why we can graph them on this two-dimensional plot. Each little x is a different wrong answer. Now you can see that some of the x's are small, representing one-off answers where students just had their own particular misunderstanding. But for example, that big x at the top left is where 2,000 students had the exact same wrong answer. Now, if you have 2 students in a class of 100 that have the exact same wrong answer, you'd never notice. But when you have 2,000 students, it kind of jumps out at you. And so Andrew and his DAs went in and looked at that assignment and understood the misconception that lay at the root of it. And then they constructed a targeted error message so that any other student whose answer fell into that particular bucket would get that targeted error message as opposed to just the "you're wrong." And that gave a much more personalized and useful experience to the students because it put them on the right track in terms of what they needed to fix in order to get the right answer. And so this effectively is a much more personalized experience that you can do by utilizing this large amount of data that we have.
So there you go. The questions I'd like you to consider are, where did that data come from? Was it in a raw log? Obviously Coursera are collecting it, so that's the other thing. They have to be collecting this data so that they can query it. And then someone's got to do that, query it, and come up with a graph. Do your platforms that you're using for open courses provide that for you? So data access and data shape are all quite important.
I don't think quite yet. I mean, if you're developing that's a multiple choice question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who develops multiple choice questions, you put multiple choice do based on an understanding of students' perception. Strange, they do it the other way around. And how do they come up with that multiple choice in the first place?
Well, one of the other examples of this was they were actually using it for error detection to find the questions that they had posed incorrectly. So a tutor had created a question and he himself had got the wrong answer. And so they're using these techniques to identify bad tutors, bad questions, which is another way to look at it.
Well, it shows it both.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? It shows that there's a disconnect there, and then you look into the reasons, but either way it's jolly enough.
And also thinking about, this is a very simple XY plot, but if you were wanting to query that data on demographics, was it gender biased, location, age, how would you do that with your data? This is quite a recent one. I should have probably paid more attention to this before I did the video with Jonathan. It's looking at the length of videos in open courses that are most effective being people got to the end of it, so they didn't drop out. So in the 6 to 9 minute range, so these are groupings of video length, and I should say this is from edX, this is edX data. And this is the median time spent watching the video. So in the 6 to 9 minute, you've got a peak of, they watched 6 to minutes of it. So the conclusion is 6 minutes. Make your videos 6 minutes, not a minute longer, not a minute less, 6 minutes. Think about the data that's behind this graph. So they've recorded student activity in terms of when did they click the play button, when did they stop the play button, and then they've basically, this is a summary of, I think it's about 20,000 videos or 20,000 students. So how would you get to this graph? I have answers for these later, you'll be pleased to hear. This one's quite interesting. This is getting more advanced. This is Coursera data. It's quite interesting. This analysis is looking at engagement and disengagement patterns within Coursera. So they're using the assignments as basically an indicator of whether or not a student is still active within the course. And they came up with a categorization. So auditing, which is, I think we would use terms like lurking, but you've got legitimate peripheral participation. B, behind, so they are still doing the assignments, but out of sequence. T is on track and O is out. And this was a summary of, I think, about 3 or 6 classes. What's also quite interesting about this analysis, it was produced by students. Stanford had the Lytics lab, where some of their students have been given access to Coursera data, and this is what they're coming up. Some interesting analysis, I think. To come up with these clusterings, they're using k-means, which is a fairly standard analytical tool. And one of the reasons that they were interested in this was they wanted to make comparisons between courses. So was there characteristics of a particular course that suited another one? So by having a way for them to pull out the data, analyze it, allowed them to start identifying differences. But again, they've had to pull out the data. They've had to do some. You can find the paper online. They've had to do several iterations to come up with this point, and there's still work, they say, to be done to refine this further. So I've kind of been prodding you about this whole data thing, data, which hopefully is the question that you keep asking FutureLearn or Coursera, data. But it has to be the right data. So if you're wanting to do analysis of videos, you need that data. So that data needs to be recorded in your system. It's not just about data, it's getting access to it. Even within an institution, there can be terrible issues with getting access to the data that you need. So even if you're using Blackboard, getting the data out there is a nightmare. Who has permissions to give that data? Google Analytics, which I'll come to in a second, is a fantastic tool for getting data and summarizing and analyzing data, but usually it's just the web admin that has access to that. How's that being distributed through your institution? So you have to get the data, you have to have the data accessible. The other thing is the shape. I was fortunate to be given access to data from one of the MOOC platforms. I can't say which. I'm under a non-disclosure agreement. But it was just a big MySQL table dump, a database. So, and talking to people from, is Amy still here? Yeah. Is that what you get from Coursera? Just a database dump? And you're kind of left to your own devices to work out. I think you can provide data in more useful means. I quite like CSV.
Yeah, FutureLearn are sending me my data as a big, scary spreadsheet, but also in a nice, tidy pink ribbon custom flavoured PowerPoint.
Good.
For the data literate. I find that very helpful. But I guess when I probably get better at this, they're not asking me questions that I would want to ask, and therefore
that's it.
I've got the data to interrogate. So that's quite helpful, I think.
Which, hopefully, if I remember my slides, data flows. So it's creating these recipes of, you can get a dump of data out of your provider, but you're able to quickly turn that into something that's useful to you, that provides the particular insight that you need. And there's a whole list of tools that you can do to do that. But I think within open courses, there's a great opportunity to actually share some expertise around. Whether or not the people that have the dollar signs in our eyes will permit that. Hopefully they will. So I just wanted to highlight some kind of quick wins, easy alternatives that you might not have been aware of, but might kind of stimulate some of your thoughts in this area. So here we have again the longest video blah 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 graph. 20,000 students, several weeks work. This is YouTube. Have you done the? I don't know if you can see this. This is the audience retention graph on a YouTube clip. So this is one of my videos, the snowflake. It was about Louis Young. That's what I gave.
We love the snowflake.
Well, no one liked it. We got just above 20% of people got to the end. What was that about? So this is there on YouTube. And YouTube do provide a data export to a degree. So we can see it 9% and gradually get up. But that was, so this video is it's kind of a nice fluffy data visualization video. This is a different video. This is a instructional video. Look at these peaks. You've got people, and this is the nice thing about this. When I play this back, I can see the video, so I can see the point. where people are hanging on. So this is an interesting point in terms of cognition, misconception maybe. This video's had, I think, 2,000 views, so you've got quite a decent data set there of what's going on. And there's other things within the YouTube analytics about demographics, location, gender, which might help you.
How do you interpret when the number of people watching it later is higher than the one before? How do
you can specify the date range. Oh, so yeah. It's not one I've dug deeply into.
So what I'm saying is people, because on YouTube, for example, you can see the thumbnail.
Yeah.
So you can very quickly
Yeah.
go through and jump.
Yeah.
How do the analytics go from jumping through a video? If you go to 4 minutes and then go through the thumbnails. And
Don't
then
know,
jump.
would be the honest answer. And whether or not that information is public is another question, which is another consideration if you were to go down this route. The MCQ test. What you can do in Google Analytics is you can actually do event tracking. So if you've got a MCQ and you've got Google Analytics, you can track which response people made to that MCQ. You can tag it as correct or wrong. Within Google Analytics itself, you can get a summary chart. Google Analytics also allows you to do segmentation. So we could do, which Daphne didn't have. I could do age, gender. I can run experiments with Google Analytics, A/B testing. So I could be, tweaking the platform design, running tests and getting data out of Google Analytics. So earlier I mentioned the issue of quite often Google Analytics is held by your web team, and they don't like giving you admin right or admin access. You can get it out as CSV, that's a manual process, but there are automated ways of doing it as well. Basically now Google have a bit of code that lets you proxy the data. So you can create a segment or an analysis or a slice of data, and then just make that available on a server behind authentication, so you can give people access to the raw data in a controlled way. So the next one, how am I doing on time? 3 more, okay. So this is Canvas. Have you come across Canvas? VLE, made in the States. Canvas have Canvas networks, so basically it's a platform to provide open courses. So you can set up, you have the standard kind of VLE tools with discussion forums, announcements, assignments. Really nice thing about Canvas is it has an API. APIs, familiar with everyone? Basically, an API is a way for your platform will have lots of data locked away in it, or processes or functions, and you have something you want to do with that data, processes, functions, and so you write a bit of code that talks to their server, and their server gives it back to you. And the Canvas one is very well documented. So we can take a discussion forum within Canvas, and with a bit of API magic, we get into a spreadsheet. This was one I did for the Learning Analytics open course. Once it's in the spreadsheet, you can just play around with the visualization tools in there. This is a Google spreadsheet, so I can share it with anyone. So I shared it with the course. So we could compare how we were doing performance-wise. The tutors could see how we were doing performance-wise. Having access to an API really helps get the data out so that anyone who has access to it can slice it up, dice it, try and find something interesting or useful. There's a link up there for more information about that particular one. You can go further. So this is taking it into social network analysis. So we're looking at the individual discussions. And one of the reasons to go into social network analysis is that it provides insight into how the group are doing, particular characters within the group. So those were all dealing with other people's platforms. So at Alt, we've actually experimented with our own platform. We ran Octel, which was an open course that ran early in the year. Not huge numbers, 1,400 students registered. It was in WordPress, so we had full control over the platform, which was a godsend because we could create our own data APIs, get the data out that we wanted, which we found useful. So for this one, it was a connectivist course, so we wanted to identify all the students who had just created a blog and made their first post and hadn't had any comments as a way to target some insight for the tutor team, to target resource to say, hey, go and give this guy some love and affection, go and tell him what he's doing is good, wrong, right. So it's another example of just taking the data out and doing something useful with it. One of the issues within the open context, a truly open context when you're not platform specific, is that people have different profiles online, and there's a danger that they become analytically cloaked. But it was quite an eye-opener for me when I came across a site called Full Contact. Basically, you provide a list of email addresses, and it goes off and searches those email addresses against various databases, and it comes back with a hit rate of, I think, around, so I put in 250 email addresses, and it's come back to 178 people. It was reasonably kind of, it thought it knew who they were. And it comes back with all this information, which Twitter profile they have, which blog, if they're on Clouds, their gender, which is quite scary. So even within an open context, you can actually find out quite a lot about someone and then use that data for good people. And we're going on at Alt to do something with the MOOC Research Initiative to look at some of this open data and analytically cloaked. And this was the last slide. So this was from Simon again, this idea of sharing some of these recipes, sharing some of these tools, because the field is very broad, and I think we could learn a lot together.
Lovely. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll do the questions in the panel with Martin can be on the panel.
Sure.
And then if Amy and Helen are on the panel. So where's the microphone that's running? You've got the microphone, okay. So Amy, so I'll chair, but I'll sit here. Sit at the end.
Shall I just move this out?
Sorry.
I was just doing some data sharing.
Yeah, we were just sharing some actual data.
Okay.
That's good to meet you anyway.
Yeah, good to meet you too.
I'm so going to go back to my Pro Vice Chancellor.
So okay then, so are there any questions for the panel? We've got a microphone roaming around if anyone has any questions. There must be something. Mike.
One of the problems with data and analyzing is when people want to make conclusions and draw conclusions, if they haven't got the data they really want, then they'll try and draw conclusions from the data they've got. So people say, here's the data, and you say, well, I wish I had that data because that's really important one, but this is all I've got, so I'll draw the conclusions from that. Any comments?
I don't know if we can fight human nature.
If we can measure, what I'm really saying is,
yeah, right.
The easy things to measure are the things you've got the data, and therefore you make statements about those. But some of the important things are harder to measure, and so you say nothing about those.
Right, it goes further than that. As soon as you start measuring something, the danger is that people just gravitating to that metric. So, it's Campbell's law, I think, is how it's defined. So yeah, there is a complexity of issues in this.
I think this is a really interesting question, because it seems to me that at the moment we're still in a place where, for at least UK higher education, we could define what makes good for a MOOC. We're still in a position where, Edinburgh are way ahead of most of us, but we're still in a position where we might be able to define that and own that a little bit. And so we could have lots of definitions of what makes good, and therefore we could look for different sort of data. And so my feeling is that we do actually try to own the kind of agenda that you're referring to, and actually make something of that. I always tell my students when we do, I do Learning Technology 101 kind of thing with them, and we talk about being digital citizens, and I say, you know when you get something for free online, and they go, yeah, it's great, and I said, what's the product? And they go, and I say, you're the product, and they go, oh, I don't want to be. And then, well, don't do it then, because if you're not paying, then you're the product. And I think what we need to do is to try to make sure that we're owning the data here rather than the data owning us. And I'm very keen that I should present to the people who have who have the power to direct the project in my university the right kind of data to get the right kind of answers, because otherwise they're going to get a hold of the wrong sort of data. It's a bit like the national. I hate to invoke it in this room, but it's a bit like the National Student Survey. That data has disproportionate amount of power, compared to its actual efficacy as a tool for quality. But we need to make sure that doesn't happen in the MOOC world, I think, and that's why people, are so valuable who actually understand big data, because we need to actually own that.
There are questions via Twitter, if anyone's interested. So Katie Jordan has asked, Edinburgh MOOCs as less risky area to try out innovations than campus. To what extent is it about the money?
It's never been about the money.
No. Okay. There you go, Katie.
I guess I don't really understand the question fully then.
So that led to quite a lot of further chat on the Twitter stream, kind of looking at what were kind of people saying, well, comments like, if it's not about the money, then what's happening is you are running kind of exercises of some kind, whether it's for marketing or whether it's for increasing your own internal capacity, whichever thing you're going for. Different people say different things. And yet they're doing it out of the premium of 9,000 quid a head from the students that are currently attending. So you're doing your, and then...
So I think as well, just because we're not necessarily looking at direct return on investment does not mean that we're not getting return on investment in other ways. So we've had book deals have been signed as a result of the MOOC activity. We've had research publications, we've had collaborations, partnerships. We've got a PhD student has just started in September as a direct result of being inspired by her EDC MOOC experience, that she came to Edinburgh to study with those academics. It's things like that that make it worthwhile. It's not about the seeing the money follow those it's kind of seeing this wider impact agenda on things that actually often can't be measured, and that's where it becomes a bit difficult.
I think that direct word is the word we've managed to get out of our kind of business model. We're not going to get direct return on investment, but there's all sorts of ways that might get indirect return.
Definitely.
I think it could, but I don't think we should be shy if it is about the money. One slide that I didn't get to show when I did my presentation was about the MOOC Plus model. So how you monetize the MOOC, how you keep the teaching and learning bit free, and then the stuff that you plug into it, the enhanced assessment, the face-to-face opportunities, the publishing, and so on, and how you monetize that part of it. So although I'm aware that there's a kind of element of the MOOC movement that has something in common with the kind of open education movement, which is sort of quite a strong philosophy of this is free for the public good. I don't think we should say, in that case maybe we shouldn't make money out of it, because I think that we probably can. And if you look at some of the things that Coursera are doing, if they're not making money already, then they will be. So I completely agree with all of the other things that can happen as a result. But we do want to make money out of it.
But I think there's a big difference there between something being sustainable and something being profitable.
Yes.
And that there's no harm in having direct income generated, but it's never going to be the £100,000 per MOOC instance that suddenly they become very lucrative. It might. Some people may choose to put every plugin in, and it may make a lot of money. But I think often we're concerned about kind of having enough for the overheads of teaching assistants and stuff, more than it being making additional money to make the overall piece back.
But I was just quickly to that, Doug Fisher mentioned that he asked his students, if you got a distinction, would you like to be a teaching assistant? And it's about reputation, and it's about interaction, and it's about community, which is a driver.
We had a really, really nice instance in equine nutrition where the course was free, but the community loved the course so much that they all put into a charity pot. A large number of people contributed to this charitable donation, and then they, as a community, they donated that amount of money that had been raised to an equine charity of, I can't remember which one it was, Donkey Sanctuary or something, but it was but it was really lovely to show that there is a desire, that there's a value within the experience, but it doesn't necessarily need to be put back into the course, but it could have been if they had chosen. It was just that the collective said, we want to put this towards
we're all heading in the same direction here. We all want to do this, and we want to do it well, and we all recognise that somehow we can't afford to do it for free because we have mortgages to pay. So everybody needs to be covering their costs, at least, if not making a little bit of money, and we all want to do it really well. And I don't think necessarily the two things conflict, but there might be people from the OER movement who would really like to argue with me about that.
I think
just clarify.
You shouldn't forget. Jonathan basically did everything. He didn't do a MOOC though. Damn, Jonathan. But he did it for free. It didn't cost him anything. He still does his face-to-face class, but he has this very rich 34,000 other people participating, helping his students. Yeah. So maybe you should flip it around, and he's got 34,000 graduate teaching assistants.
Yeah. Well, our EDC MOOC it repurposed all its content and didn't have any videos in the first instance. So it was actually free, but if you're looking at academic time being already part of the mix. And that had 30-odd thousand. So yeah, it's MOOC space, not MOOC space, much the same.
Okay. So you had a question?
It's probably for Amy again, actually, because you've been in the game longer. We heard this morning about potential for MOOCs, the positive disruption for the institution, and that there would be investment in staff and in courses, and innovations would happen there. To what extent, and you've got a feel for that happening in Edinburgh, particularly I'm interested in things like staff development around enabling them to acquire the new skills. Are you seeing that happen? Is that something that's been a real benefit for engagement?
I think we were also in a slightly different domain of development, in that there was a big agenda for online learning engagement and investment in the distance education initiative. And so when MOOCs came along, it became part of that mix. And so we see it as being an online learning agenda. And so there has been a lot of investment in staff development and training and expansion of that community, but it's been perhaps with a foundation that's already established rather than it.
Any innovation within courses? Or,
it's probably a little bit too early to tell. We're seeing some things, and it's slow moving. So we've had conversations started with schools that have who had been putting up barriers, saying we don't think that we can do online learning, and they're now starting to see, oh, actually maybe we could do a MOOC. And for us, that's a huge step change.
Well, that's what everybody
wants.
Yeah. I mean, if you're getting that, you've got a catalyst there. And what's interesting to hear from your story is the way that it's been such a positive impact on staff in terms of they want to get on board and do it.
Yeah, very much so.
The early players now in other areas, there's a lot of reticence, and it's understanding what story we can tell to get that shift in attitude.
I think we were in a very fortunate position that our principal and vice principals were very keen on taking this forward. There was also then a collective interest, grassroots, to be involved in it. It at the right time, it kind of worked, and so everyone could then push each other in a very positive manner. But we also had started those conversations of being part of MOOCs about a year, 2 years before we then went into it, so we were at maybe a slightly different stage of the evolution, and people are now almost doing the same. So we're seeing the same progress occur, but it's just that it's a year later, but actually the same things are happening. You can see slow building collective change, and that's really positive.
I just wanted to quickly say that Katie's responded and said that her question was more about pedagogical innovation online on campus rather than making money, and is on campus more risk adverse because students are paying for it. So that's what she meant.
Oh, right, okay.
But anyway, there's a gentleman just in the front, and then Mike after that, just a gentleman just in the front.
I say with most of it, it's too early to tell.
Yeah.
We're starting to see some positive rumbles, but
yeah.
This is Bernard again, and I'm going to ask probably a question about even the video Martin presented by Daphne Kola. I think she mentioned that sometimes by selecting students, we sometimes leave out many students who have the potential to be good students, but because we are probably selecting them, and some of them cannot afford the courses, which are very expensive anyway. And I'm wondering, with some business models, what do you think of some business models we're starting seeing emerging with MOOCs? For example, with the Masters of Computer Science with Georgia Institute of Technology, where they enroll so many students, but they pay less. So they get the money, even probably more than what they would get if they close the class to very few students. But it's not a huge burden for the students. So they pay the money, but they pay less because it is economy of scale they are exploiting. So what do you think of that? Anyone? Is that a question?
About Georgia Institute of Technology and their masters, yeah. I think they're very brave to do that. Well, I think they're very brave.
I mean, offering the courses to many people who have the potential, but who are left unprofessional, then they pay little money they can afford. Then the institution get the amount they could even get by closing the class to very few students.
I think it's the pedagogical scaling implications rather than, I think if we had all the stuff scale at the same time, then and the cost could be covered, then great. I guess the main kind of hesitation that many people have is having 200,000 people on a MSc program when the MSc program is meant to be about a tutored experience, it's personal development. Can that happen in such a scale space? Can it be individual? Maybe it can. If it can, then there's an opportunity. But exactly as you say, they are very brave to be entering into that space, and someone's got to enter first.
Yeah, I mean, it's the QAA were batted away earlier on today quite firmly, but I in my position, because I, as well as heading up this project, I'm also Associate Dean for Learning, Teaching and Quality, with the Q hats quite heavily on me at the moment because we've got an upcoming institutional audit, and I can't bat the QAA away quite as easily, and I would agree with you that there are some serious concerns about whether we can align the MOOC learning experience with a blended or campus-based learning experience sufficiently to put our hands on our hearts and say, yes, this is the same experience. And there's stuff about study time and access to materials and that one-to-one development, with and all of those kind of things. So it does become complex. But I think the kind of root of your question is MOOC, are MOOCs going to in some way provide us with opportunities to extend the reach of higher education? And I think all of the data that we have about MOOC demographics at the moment in the US and the UK very firmly says no, they don't, because they're just not doing that at the moment. Now, whether they're going to do that in the future, I don't know, but the data is really clear at the moment that people signing up for MOOCs pretty much all already have an undergraduate degree. That's not the demographic that we're hitting at the moment.
But, I just wanted to mention about the model of American institutions. Their model of education is different from ours, and they haven't got the pressures of the QAA that we would have here. So our institutions are used to the kind of rigor that we need to go through to put up a module online, whereas the American institutions do have rigor, but they don't have a body called the QAA on them all the time. So there's not that, the way that we do our education system is completely different, and that's why the MOOCs could take off the way that they've done. So.
Yeah, and probably in other ways, looking awareness based on competencies people have demonstrated that they have developed. I'm not sure how that will help probably. We have standards, very high standards, not necessarily very lenient standards. They're very high standards. Students come and demonstrate that they have developed those competencies. Maybe they can even demonstrate that they have developed more competencies than campus-based students.
Yeah, but I wasn't saying that the institutions in America don't have, Stanford, of course, and but an MIT, but they do have very high standards, but it's a different model of education. Like Doug was talking about nuts and bolts education, so everyone in America has to do Calculus 101. And what the fear was in America was that if you could record those sessions and just give them to somebody, then that covers that first year and that's fine. And then all the administrators were saying, do that course, just do that one. Whereas over here, we have a different model of education. So we don't have 101 courses, we don't have a broader range like that. So it's different models of education fitting into different holes and routes and shapes and things. So.
Sorry for picking up on that. How does the Open University, the UK Open University fit with that system? Because
where is the Open University? I think I'm home.
But I think the Open University is highly restricted.
But the Open University does go through the same processes that an institution here would do. So just because it's at a distance, it should have no impact on a student studying on campus. But that doesn't always happen in other countries. That specific code is something that the QAA have put down, that a student from a distance in a UK institution should not be disadvantaged. They should have exactly the same experience as a student on campus. So if we follow that role, it's very, very hard for us to do a MOOC as a degree when we have so many other experiences in the institutions. We do still do distance programs. I'm a master's student at Edinburgh, so I'm having the same, but I'm very aware of what my rights are as a student online. If you're a learner on a MOOC, you may not necessarily have those same rights.
It's very difficult to get library provisions for 200,000 concurrent users. It's a lot easier when you know that you've only got 50 students on your class, and it could be a big one. It's not quite as simple as just chuck everything online. There are other things that need to be put into consideration.
One interesting development in Scotland is that they're developing a national framework for recognition of prior learning. So how that would fit within the MOOC context, where you have nationally agreed guidelines on if someone comes to you and says, I've done these courses, I've got certificates, even if they're unofficial or just completion, record of completion. will they get into the second year or the third year as a consequence of that? And will people make marketplaces just for that? Well, Scotland's obviously quite a small country, so
testbed.
In terms of enhancing the learning for students at a particular university, might the money and resources and time that are spent on a few MOOCs with very high production values be better spent in terms of enhancing the learning and teaching in the university by spreading the money and resources more thinly and doing small improvements on lots of courses for lots of students?
Well, I think this is, it'd be great if Jonathan was on this panel, because he'd be saying he had no money. He did this. He had no money, and as a consequence of it, he'll say that his students have got a much better enhanced experience because of it.
So take the money away and I'll do that.
Yes, he said that a lot of the decisions he took was because he had no money, which I think is quite interesting. I think the whole idea of combining a face-to-face provision with something else that allows the world to come and participate, to join, I think is very interesting. But it was quite Stephen Downes was talking at Alt-C, and one of the things he said was one of the biggest mistakes he made was calling MOOCs courses. His original vision wasn't that they were courses; they were models. They were opportunities for people to come together and connect. He obviously conversations, communities, not courses.
But I know what you're saying, Mike, but I think what I think the MOOCs have done is opened up the door to academics that would have no interest in going online at all or changing the model that they teach, and it's encouraged them to look wider. So the impact for those MOOCs that we're spending lots of money on has been, for the long term, I think, opening up the door to experimenting with innovative ways of teaching. That's what I'd say to you, Mike. So James, do you want to say?
Hi, James Little, University of Leeds. I've got a question really about, I guess, the platform-based approach to MOOCs that seems to be developing. Is it kind of an opportunity, or is it kind of a complicated threat, that we could end up with loads of different platforms all kind of doing the same thing?
Opportunity. We couldn't have got as far as we get without future learning in so many ways. That for us it's that if you've got more resources behind you and you've got people who can code and stuff, then maybe you could do something more bespoke and you could keep more of the money, or you could do your own things. But actually, for us, there was no choice. Really.
But often it's about choosing the right laboratory for your experiment. There are some things that are going to make a lot more sense to have on a bespoke platform that really the outreach is going to be a lot smaller than going on to something that already has an established user base of like 4.5 million. There'll be certain things that having lots of options available to you in itself is a real opportunity to be exploring new spaces for new purposes, and taking that opportunity and running with it, rather than kind of saying, there are all these things and maybe we should try, we must go for that particular platform. Because actually sending school kids, for example, over to Coursera to engage with the course isn't as, that's not what we would want to do. We would probably want to put a local Moodle instance on with content populated on a similar thing, because we know that we can manage it and it will give it the right experience. So I think it's about looking at the audience, looking at the purpose, and then choosing something accordingly. So I would agree it's an opportunity. That's not to say that we need millions of them. I think there will come a critical mass point where we probably stop new developments, and then it just becomes a localised thing. But who knows? Who knows?
Right, okay, it's 4:15 now, so I think I'd say thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much. So, thank you. Baron, were you going to?
Yes, I wanted to say thank you as well, and close today.
I wanted to say thank you to Fiona in particular, because she's really, with her colleagues at the MOOCs, made this day possible within 2 months, pulling together what I thought was a really exciting programme of speakers. Lots of different media. I think everybody who was involved in that deserves credit for that as well. So I think we should say thank you. Often when we have events like this, and I hope you've enjoyed today, there is sort of a feeling of this was a great day, but what next? And this time there is an answer, isn't there? Yeah. Because what next is join the Alt-MOOC SIG and continue the conversation. One of the hopes that we have is that the group will be quite active organising online and face-to-face events over the next period of time, and we want to support that. So we really hope that you will join the group and become involved, you know, give us your feedback and continue the conversation on Twitter. Thank you to the Digital. But I also have a few more people to thank before we all hurry off. Our DigiChamps there, if you want to maybe stand up and well done. I think there's quite a few dotted around. You're handy. I think they've been snipping videos of us throughout the day, and so we're looking forward to having lots of wavy videos coming our way after the event. The university's been fantastic to us, a really hospitable environment here. And I also wanted to thank Caroline Greaves, our events manager, who's organised the event with Martin. Done a lot of the technology wizardry today, and it's been great to have remote participants as well. So I wish you all a safe journey home. We hope you enjoyed the day, and then we shall see you again soon, hopefully in the next MOOC SIG event. Thanks again, Fiona.
That was fun. Thank you.
Digital ed? Yes. Oh, yeah, because I see your name all the time. I think,
she's on everything.
But I just kind of assumed that it's because we're all in the same kind of circles. But you are on it as well. Oh, great, lovely. So what did you take this?
Because I started in 2010. I started in Google.
I didn't like it sounds like no one does anything.
So like, how do you stop otherwise the stream will. And then I was offered a neck. I just stopped. My arm was ailing to my neck. I had to have a neck operation for God's sake.